Hi and welcome to my channel. We continue our series on English grammar lessons, in particular the 12 grammatical tenses of the English language. Today we'll be talking about the past tenses. That is the past simple, the past continuous or the past progressive, the past perfect and the past perfect progressive. If you haven't seen the first part of this series, please follow the link in the description down below. If you have, let's continue with the second part. Today we'll be talking about the past room of tenses, if you remember our analogy or the way we imagine the tenses on the timeline. Today we speak about the past, that is the past simple tense, the past progressive tense, the past perfect tense and the past perfect progressive tense. Each of these tenses, of course, has its own markers. For example, when we speak about the past simple tense, we speak about something that happened, let's say, in 1995. When we speak about past progressive, we speak about an action that was going on at a particular moment in the past. Past perfect helps us speak about things that had happened before another action in the past, that is, before the action that is expressed by the past simple tense or the past progressive tense. And past perfect progressive helps us speak about things that were going on in the past but preceded another action. This is where we are today. You remember that we have four aspects in the language, and that's why we have four tenses in each of these sections on the timeline. Here they are. If we speak about the past simple tense, we might say something like, he read a lot of books. In the past progressive tense, that will be, he was reading a book at that moment, at a particular moment in the past. The past perfect tense will help us say he had read that book before, that is, before another moment in the past. And the past perfect progressive tense helps us describe something that was going on in the past and preceded something else. He had been reading a lot before another moment in the past or before another period in the past. For example, he had been reading a lot before he got married. Let's now compare the present and the past tenses in each of the aspects. The simple aspect helps us speak about simple things that are facts or laws of nature, or helps us describe things that are permanent. He reads a lot of books. That's what present simple is. He read a lot of books. That is the past simple tense. He reads generally now versus he read generally in the past. The progressive aspect helps us speak about something which is or was continuing for a while. So in the present progressive tense, we'll say he is reading a book now, that is a process that is taking place now. And in the past progressive, we will say he was reading a book at that moment. That was a process that was going on at a particular moment in the past. The perfect aspect helps us speak of a result, of something that brought a result by now or by some particular moment in the past. The present perfect is he has read a good book. He has read it and now he wants to share his knowledge with us. In the past perfect, we'll say he had read good books before another action or before another period in his life, in the past. The perfect progressive aspect is about result and duration. So he has been reading science fiction for a while now. Now he has already read some science fiction books and he has been doing it for a while now. The past perfect progressive, he had been reading a lot before he got that job. Then he didn't have any time for reading anymore. This table helps us see how the tenses correlate. We speak about the same qualities of actions, but in the present or in the past. Now let's take a closer look at the first tense we'll discuss today, that is the past simple tense. So we form the past simple tense with the help of the auxiliary verb did and the verb in the second form, or the verb with the ending ed. We have this difference because the verbs in the English language can be generally divided into two categories: regular and irregular. In the table of the regular verbs, you'll find all the forms you need to form the past simple tense and the past perfect tense. And eventually you will have to learn this table by heart because it contains all the verbs that are frequently used in everyday communication. That is, to be, to do, to have, to drink, to drive, to sleep, anything that you normally do in your everyday life. So you cannot do without that table. Let's now take a closer look at different types of sentences in the past simple tense. Affirmative sentences, or we can also call them declarative sentences or statements, have the verb in the second form or with the ending ed. In our case, the verb is tell, so that's why we have told. I told the truth, we told the truth, you told the truth, he told the truth, she told the truth, it told the truth, they told the truth. You have the same verb form for all the persons, and you don't have any auxiliaries in statements in the past simple tense. In negative sentences, you have to drop this second form or the ending ed, because now you will have the auxiliary did. So we say, I didn't tell, we didn't tell, you didn't tell, he didn't tell, she didn't tell, and so on and so forth. So now you have the first form of the verb, tell, because in negative sentences we have didn't. The same happens with interrogative sentences. We have did in the first place, as we usually do in questions, and your main verb is in the first form again. Did I tell the truth? Did we tell the truth? Did you tell the truth? And so on and so forth. Thus, we divide all the verbs in the language into two groups: regular and irregular. Regular verbs take the ending ed, irregular verbs have their irregular forms. Let's look at some examples. To arrange, arranged. To trust, trusted. To estimate, estimated. To stay, stayed. To wonder, wondered. These are all regular verbs, and you see there is this ending ed. Irregular verbs have their forms, which you have to memorize. To do, did, done. To read, read, read. To fall, fell, fallen. To speak, spoke, spoken. To wear, wore, worn. Let's compare how regular and irregular verbs behave in different types of sentences. He arranged a meeting yesterday. He didn't arrange a meeting yesterday. Did he arrange a meeting yesterday? Yes, he did. What we did here is we got rid of the ending ed in the negative form and in the question. Let's now look at irregular verb, to stand. He stood his ground yesterday. He didn't stand his ground yesterday. Did he stand his ground yesterday? Yes, he did. What happened here? We disposed of the second form. Now we have stand instead of stood because we have did, right? Stand. Did he stand his ground yesterday? To stand one's ground means to protect your vision, your beliefs, and not to give in. Now let's speak about the past simple tense of to be. Previously we discussed that to be is an anomalous finite. That means it behaves in its particular way, it has its own forms that you have to memorize in the present simple and in the past simple as well. To be can both function as an auxiliary verb and as a main verb. If in the present tense we have three forms, that is I, am, we, you, they, are, and he, she, it is. In the past we have only two. We say was with all the singular persons and were with plural. I was there, we were or weren't there, You were or weren't there. He was or wasn't there. She was or wasn't there. It was or wasn't there. And they were or weren't there, depending on whether it is a positive sentence or a negative one. Yeah. In interrogative sentences, of course, to be goes to the first place, that is, it behaves like an auxiliary verb. Was I there? Were we there? Were you there? Was he there? Was she there? Etc. Now, how do we know that we need to use the past simple tense? Well, the past simple tense expresses things that happened in a finished period of time. That is, these things, they are not related to the present, they are not connected to the present, they do not influence the present anymore. The action is cut off from the present, you see? It is cut off from the present. It has no connection to the present. It doesn't influence the present in any way. The 5 main markers of the past simple tense are yesterday, last, year, month, week, etc. Ago, like 5 years ago or 10 days ago, in 1999 or in the 15th century, and once. Fairy tales usually start with the words "once upon a time there lived a king" or whoever. So the past simple tense can express states or actions and series of actions that happened in a finished period of time in the past. There weren't many people at the post office yesterday. It's a state of affairs in the past. She bought her first car in 2017. It's a singular action in the past. It was very cold last week. Now it's much warmer. A weather condition in the past. We saw Anne in town a few days ago. An action in the past. He smoked a cigarette and left the room. The past simple tense is used in storytelling. So when you retell a story and you have a series of actions that happened one after another in the past, you use the past simple tense. We used to spend our summer holidays at our grandpa's house when we were kids. Pay attention to the structure used to, which expresses a repeated action in the past. And what do we have here? We have a situation in the past, a state of affairs in the past. He jumped every time the phone rang. A repeated action in the past. The police stopped her on her way home last night. An action in the past. Sam worked for that company for a couple of years. A state of affairs in the past. Where were you yesterday? I called, but you never answered. Again, it's a state of affairs in the past. It's a situation, that took place yesterday. And I called, it's an action, a repeated action in the past. Okay, let's move on. Past simple and used to. Before we go to the theory, let's look at some examples I've taken from several books. As a child, I used to fall so deeply into prayer that my mother would shake me in church and punish me for sleeping during services. My father used to call me a dromedary, but these days I grew weary after 10 steps. I used to keep documents, but it was too discouraging to watch them be eaten away, even as I laid down the words. The ripening climate here produces fruit and flower in abundance, you see, but also mold and rot. These sentences were taken from The Signature of All Things by Elizabeth Gilbert. And what do we see here? What does used to express? It helps us speak of repeated things in the past. Things that belong to a finished period in the past, things that happen no more, but used to happen often. They were trivial or usual things in the past. Now let's look at another set of examples. When threatened by an enemy, people used to retire into these fortresses, often built on some rising piece of ground, taking with them their valuables. The older generation, indeed, lament that dancing is no longer what it used to be. For in their time, the Shrove Tuesday party used never to break up till the Thursday morning. These examples were taken from The Land Beyond the Forest by Emily Gerard. Again, we speak about things that were normal or were usual, were repeated multiple times in the past, but happen no more. We speak about used to now because this is a structure that only exists in the past simple tense, as it speaks of something that was going on in the past and remained there, remained in the room of the past. Now let's look at somewhat different structure or group of structures that often puzzle my students. We'll start with examples. The native people here were bigger than the people Alma was used to. Alma had become used to the want of privacy, and she was comforted by the presence of the sailors. Again, the examples are from The Signature of All Things by Elizabeth Gilbert, and as you see, was used to is not the same as used to. Was used to helps us convey a state in which somebody or something is. She was in what kind of state? She was such that was used to something. Yeah? Alma had become used to. Become shows entering in this state. Yeah, but still we speak about a state. And this structure you can use in different tenses. You can say I am used to, or I will get used to, I will become used to something. Let's look at some other examples. You know, she's not used to girls, said Jem. Leastways, not girls like you. She's trying to make you a lady. That's from To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. This is an example with a negative particle not, so she is not used to girls. She's not okay with girls, yeah, and she doesn't feel comfortable with girls. Again, the state, that is what be used to expresses here. I've grown used to this paper, though at that time I don't think I'd seen it more than once before. These people spend a lot of their time poking about with rocks, mostly in very cold places. They get used to it. Arctic temperatures mean nothing to them. That's from No Night is Too Long by Barbara Vine. I have grown used to, yeah, or they get used to. The verbs to grow or to get show us the transition into a state. Be used to can be a passive structure that helps us to say that something is applied or engaged in order to do something. Let's look at the examples. Linguistics, archaeology, and written classical sources were used to demonstrate that colonization had occurred in antiquity. They were engaged in order to demonstrate, applied in order to demonstrate. Yeah, so this is what is meant. They were used to, the passive voice. Resistivity meter is used to measure the electrical current passing between electrodes that are placed in the ground. The same passive voice, right? They are used to, they are applied to. Archaeological data have been used to provide a much more complete picture of plantation life and slave society. Obsidian, sometimes referred to as volcanic glass, is a naturally occurring stone that is common in some world areas. It flakes very regularly and so was used to produce beautiful stone tools such as knives, spear points, and scrapers. The same meaning. We see this structure used in different tenses. The structure used to can only be used in the past simple. Let's juxtapose these structures. Used to be used to, and the rest of them, like to grow used to get used to become used to, yeah, showing the transition into a state. And to be used like the passive form of to use. So used to means a recurrent action in the past that does not happen in present anymore. He used to smoke, he's quitted smoking. He didn't used to smoke, but now he does. Did he used to smoke? No, he didn't. To be used to grow used to get used to become used to, means to be or to get accustomed to something. Can be used in many tenses, as we have seen. She is used to his smoking inside. She isn't used to his smoking inside. Is she used to his smoking inside? Yes, she is. And another set of examples. She got used to it long ago. She didn't get used to it and said she never would. Did she get used to his smoking? Yes, she did. Please pay attention that in this case, used to is a verb. So that's why we say didn't use to. The ending ed went to didn't. While in these examples, it's the participle to, so we still keep the ending. She is in what state, yeah? To use, to be used, to deploy or to apply something, to engage something, can be used in many tenses as well. Anti-smoking patches are used to help people quit smoking. These markers can't be used to write on glass. Was this method used in the study? Yes, they used it. Again, you know the passive voice is formed with the help of to be and the participle to. That's what we have here, right? The past simple and would. Used to and would are synonyms. They both express recurrent actions, situations, or habits in the past. Let's compare two passages. As the storm grew heavier, Alma would watch as her world closed in on her. Fog and darkness would approach from the sea. First, the horizon would disappear, then the island of Muria in the distance would vanish, then the reef was gone, then the beach, and then she and Roger would be all alone in the mist. Then the rain would stop for a spell and the blistering sun would return. Sudden, brilliant, stunning, though never long enough that Alma could properly dry out her sleeping palette. Again, that's from The Signature of All Things by Elizabeth Gilbert. And another example, I would lie there beside David's beautiful, inaccessible sleeping body, and I would spin into a panic of loneliness and meticulously detailed suicidal thoughts. Most mornings, David would wake to find me sleeping fitfully on the floor beside his bed, huddled on a pile of bathroom towels like a dog. What happened now? He would ask. Another man thoroughly exhausted by me. That's from Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert. What do we see in these two beautiful passages? The language is poetic, and the repeatedness of actions that we want to show is expressed in a more poetic, in a more beautiful way with the help of would. Would cannot be used with the verbs that express feelings and emotional states, but it can be used with action verbs, just like used to. But would is much more poetic and much more elegant. That's why you would normally see it in texts like these, in novels, yeah, in a written form rather than in everyday communication. In everyday communication, you would stick to used to. Like, I used to have a dog when I was a kid, yeah? But please note that would also has other uses. Don't confuse the case of a repeated action that you have just seen in the examples with these uses of would. Would is a modal verb, yeah, and it can be used in many different ways. I tried again and again, but the car wouldn't start. That means that the car didn't want to start. I wish we would see each other more often. Would expresses desire in a situation which is now not real. If the weather were better, we would take a little walk. A conditional sentence, again, the situation is not real in the present. If it hadn't been for his help, we would have been lost. Another conditional sentence that expresses an unreal situation in the past. I would rather you didn't go there alone. That means I don't want you to go there alone. I don't think that it's a good idea for you to go there alone. I would like to clarify one more thing. A polite request. I would like to clarify, yeah? Would you let me? Would you like to go to a restaurant tonight? What do we do in this question? We offer something. So, would you like to do something expresses an offer. I speak of all of these uses of would in a separate video on the modal verb would, and you can find it in the description below. Now let's proceed. Let us now pay attention to some pronunciation rules that we have in the past simple tense. The ending ed is pronounced in three different ways. We read ed as id after t and d. Wanted, landed, hesitated, fainted, etc. We read the ending ed as d after the rest of voiced consonants and after vowels. Opened, managed, played, analyzed, etc. And we read it as voiceless t after voiceless consonants except the letter T. Worked, kissed, hoped, helped, etc. Please remember these rules. They are not difficult to memorize, but they will make your pronunciation much better. Another set of rules that you have to remember is when do we need to change the letter Y into I when we add ed. So we change Y into I before the ending ed if it is preceded by a consonant. To reply, replied. To modify, modified. To carry, carried. To cry, cried. Y remains unchanged if it is preceded by a vowel. To enjoy, enjoyed. To deploy, deployed. To play, played. To betray, betrayed. You see, in the first set of examples, we have consonants L, F, R, and that's why we change Y into I and only then add ed. In the second set of examples, you have vowels O, for example, or A, and that's when you don't make any changes, so you leave Y and then add ed. Another rule is that the final consonant is sometimes doubled. When does that happen? When a verb ends in a consonant preceded by a short stressed vowel. To stop, stopped. To plan, planned. To submit, submitted. To compel, compelled. To prefer, preferred. To occur, occurred. When there is a diphthong that precedes the letter R, we don't double it. To appear, appeared. To smear, smeared. A diphthong is a combination of vowels. In our case here, it is ear. To sum all those rules up, here is the table. Please make a screenshot or write it down into your notebook. Now, how do we know whether we need to use the past simple tense or the present perfect tense? Both tenses express something which is complete, which is finished, right? But when we speak about the past simple, we speak about actions that were finished in a finished period of time. That is, we kind of separate it from the present. It is something that doesn't influence the present anymore. But when we speak about the present perfect, these are actions that, yes, have already happened, but they influence the present. So they exist in the room of the present. Let's see the examples. I bought a car many years ago in the past, and I may not have that car anymore. I have bought a car means that I have recently bought it, and here it is, I still have it. These are two very different sentences. So if you say I bought a car, your interlocutor will understand that once you had such an experience in your life, you bought a car. But what happened next? Nobody knows. Nobody understands from this question whether you still have this car or not. I have bought a car is a piece of news. Your interlocutor understands that you now have a car. The action is connected with the present. She lost her necklace and she has lost her necklace. She lost her necklace and never found it. She lost it. That period of time is finished and she abandoned any hope to find it. Yeah, it is gone for good. She has lost her necklace, means she's still trying to find it. She hasn't abandoned hope to find it yet. Please note that the words yesterday, the other day, last week, in 1999, a month ago, when, cannot be used in the present perfect because they all specify a moment in a finished period of time in the past. They are all tied to a particular moment in the past, so we don't use these expressions in the present perfect. I have seen him is a good sentence. I have seen him lately is also a good sentence. We don't specify any particular moment in the past, yeah, lately, recently. But I have seen him 2 days ago is an incorrect sentence. We should say I saw him 2 days ago. Ago is one of the markers of the past simple because it specifies a particular moment in a finished period of time in the past. In such sentences, what did you say? I didn't hear your question. What was that? Now I understand. I forget where he lives. We don't use the present perfect in such sentences because it's not a result, but a mere fact that interests us, that is important. Compare these two questions. Did you see the film and have you seen the film? What would be the difference? Did you see the film? The speaker just wants to know whether their interlocutor saw the film or not. It's a yes or no question. We are interested in the fact. But have you seen the film? The speaker wants to know not only whether the interlocutor saw the film or not, but they want to discuss it. It's an experience that is connected to the present in this case. Now let's do a little exercise together. As always, I suggest that you write the sentences down and then check the answers with me. And hoping that you have already done that, I will proceed. I have repaired the radio. It's working fine now. Why do we use the present perfect tense here? Because our action has influenced the present. The radio is working now. They have gone to Paris. They'll be back by Friday. They have gone. They are here no more. They will be back on Friday. The period of time in which this action is important is not finished yet. The place is very different now. It has changed a lot. We have a result in the present. The place is very different now. It's a result. What a fantastic car! How long have you had it? You remember we use how long with the present perfect simple or the present perfect progressive to speak about some period of time which hasn't finished yet. So I still have this car and somebody asks me, how long have you had it? All of our students achieved excellent results last semester. It's a finished period of time. Have you read this book before? Have you? It's a question about someone's experience, and he or she will probably read it one day. Helen became a teacher and taught at a small village school for many years. A fact from somebody's biography. That's a sentence about the past. It is not connected to the present anymore. We have done our homework. Can we go out now? We have done it. We have a result in the present. The Battle of Waterloo took place on Sunday, the 18th of June, 1815. A fact from the past. I'm not hungry. I have already had dinner. We have a result. I'm not hungry anymore because I have already had dinner. Tesla Motors released its first car in 2008. Again, that's a fact from the past. I have bought my first Tesla. It's a piece of news. It's an action that is still connected with the present, something fresh and alive. It stopped raining for a while, now it's raining again. In this case, it stopped raining belongs to a finished period of time, because the period of time in which there was no rain has already finished. Now it's raining. You don't need an umbrella, the rain has stopped. Here, the rain has stopped and there is no more rain. The period of time we are talking about is not finished. I hope the information that you have heard in this part of the video was useful. Now let's proceed to the next tense, which is the past progressive tense. We form the past progressive tense with the help of the verb to be in the past form, which is was and were. And the main verb acquires the ending ing. Was is used for singular persons and were for plural. This way we have I was playing the guitar when he came. She was playing the violin at that moment. They were singing alone. If your sentence is negative, you will have I was not playing the guitar when he came. She wasn't playing the violin at that moment. They weren't singing alone. In questions, we will have was I playing the guitar when he came? Was she playing the violin at that moment? Were they singing alone? It's just the same way as we have it in the present progressive, but instead of MSR, we use was and were. How do we know that we need to use the past progressive tense? The past progressive tense speaks of actions that were going on at a particular moment in the past. This particular moment in the past can be marked by another action in the past simple tense. I was playing the guitar when he came. At that moment when he came. So the markers are at that moment, at 10 p.m. yesterday, the whole day yesterday, when plus past simple. Let's look at some examples. We were working in the garden all day long. That's a process in the past. All day long shows us that the action was in progress. That's why it's not enough to use just the past simple tense. We need a progressive tense. In our case, it's the past progressive tense. She didn't notice what was going on around her. She was reading, again, a process in the past. I was walking home when I met my old friend Gary. When I met my old friend Gary is a particular moment in the past. That's why we use the past progressive tense with I was walking home, right? When I met him. What were you doing at 10 o'clock last night? At 10 o'clock last night, a defined moment in the past. I was watching Friends at 10 o'clock last night. It was raining the whole day yesterday. The whole day means that something was going on for a longer while. That was a process. This time last year, I was living in Stockholm. This time last year is a particular moment in the past at which something was going on. Jason was exercising while his wife was cooking. Here we have two processes in the past. He was exercising while she was reading. I dropped a plate when I was doing the washing up. Fortunately, it didn't break. I was doing the washing up is a process, and at one of the moments of this process, I dropped a plate. When I came into the room, my cat was sitting on the windowsill peering into the dark. When I came into the room is a particular moment in the past at which my cat was sitting peering into the dark. She was working as a waitress when we first met. The same. When we first met is a particular moment in the past. Let's compare the past simple tense with the past progressive tense. When I came home, she was cooking. When I came home is a single action in the past that happened at a particular moment in the past. She was cooking, a process in the past that happened at a particular moment in the past. So let's look at this drawing. Both actions happened in the past, but I came was a single action at a particular moment of a process that was going on for a while. She was cooking for 2 hours and I came somewhere there, at one of the moments of these 2 hours. This way, when you need to show a process, you stick to a continuous form. When you speak about a process in the past, you choose the past progressive or the past continuous tense. When you speak about something that just happened quickly, that was a single action, or when you speak about a state, you use the past simple. Some more examples to compare. It was snowing when we arrived yesterday. A process and a single action. When I returned, the guests were playing. A process and a single action. What was he doing when you walked into his room? A process and a single action. I lost the keys while we were foraging in the forest. A process and a single action. I was slowly falling asleep when the telephone suddenly rang and brought me back to my senses. I was falling asleep, a process, and the telephone suddenly rang and brought me back to my senses. Two single actions. When the fire alarm went off, they were shooting a new episode in the building. A process and a single action. Okay, now let's talk about the past perfect tense. Though I know some of you are intimidated by this tense, it's very simple. Actually, it just shows an action that happened before another action in the past. You just have to remember that you have to sequence actions in the past in English, and that's it. We form the past perfect tense with the help of one auxiliary verb, which is had, and the main verb in the third form, or the main verb with the ending ed, depending on whether it is a regular or an irregular verb. I had finished reading the chapter and then went out for a walk. She had never seen snow before she moved to Canada. We hadn't been close before the accident that happened that day. Had you spoken to the director before you invited the journalists? What do we see here? In each of these sentences, we see two actions. One that happened after another. I had finished reading and then I went out for a walk. I first had finished reading and only then I went out for a walk. She had never seen snow before she moved to Canada. There was a period in her life when she was not in Canada, and in that period of her life she didn't see snow. Then she moved to Canada, and as we have these two actions in one sentence, we need to show that one action preceded the other. She had never seen before she moved. We hadn't been close before the accident that happened that day. We hadn't been before something happened. Had you spoken to the director before you invited the journalists? The predicates in two parts of each of these sentences speak of two different periods of time. The one which is in the past perfect is the one that precedes the other one, which is in the past simple. Let's have some visual support. She was upset the whole evening. She had got an unpleasant letter. So in the past, two things happened. She was upset and she had got a letter. She first had got a letter and then she became upset. So she had got a letter happened earlier in the past. We also can see a result in here, just the way we have a result with the present perfect tense in the present, we can have a result with the past perfect tense in the past. Why was she upset? Because she had got an unpleasant letter. Okay, so how do we know that we need to use the past perfect? We use it when we want to express an action completed before a certain moment in the past. This moment can be marked by another past action expressed by a verb in the past simple or by an adverbial phrase. So our markers are before, when plus past simple, no sooner than, hardly when, scarcely when, nearly when, and barely when. We'll speak about this four separately a little bit later. Let's now look at some examples. Hardly had we arrived when the show began. I was not hungry when I came home, as I had already eaten out. When Helen arrived, Jason had already gone home. I didn't know who that woman was. I had never seen her before. No sooner had he put the phone down than it rang again. We had rented an apartment for a while before we were able to take out a mortgage. The room was a mess. They hadn't cleaned it for weeks. Scarcely had I opened the window when the room was full of flies. I had hardly got home when I realized that I had left the papers at work. The rain had nearly stopped when they reached the hotel. In each of these sentences, you see two actions or two situations. One preceded the other. Let's take a closer look at hardly. Hardly had we arrived in the first sentence, or I had hardly got home in the sentence number 9. Hardly had we arrived when the show began. That means we had arrived just before the beginning of the show. We had arrived and the show began. The show began immediately after our arrival. Number 9, I had hardly got home when I realized that I had left the papers at work. I had got home and immediately realized that. We have scarcely, which is a synonym of hardly, and nearly. They express the same thing. Scarcely had I opened the window when the room was full of flies. The room was full of flies immediately after I had opened the window. The rain had nearly stopped when they reached the hotel. The rain had stopped and they arrived immediately after it. Yeah. Okay. Also, please pay attention to number 5. No sooner had he put the phone down than it rang again. No sooner is a phrase that you use predominantly with the past perfect tense. No sooner means only when. Only when action A had been completed, action B started. We'll talk more about no sooner a little bit later. I know that hardly might be a challenging word. Why? Because it's often confused with hard. Please note that these are two very different words. He worked hardly is incorrect. He worked hard. Hardly is not an adjective. He worked hard. Let's look at some other examples. Anne was so tired she could hardly breathe. Hardly is an adverb in this case. It means scarcely, with difficulty. Hardly had I opened the door when the kids surrounded me. Hardly is a conjunction, meaning immediately after, like in our examples on the previous slide. It was hard to open the jar. The jar was hard to open. Hard is an adverb here. It is with effort. The new bed was too hard. Hard is an adjective here, meaning firm, rigid, and stiff, opposite to soft. The test was very hard to pass. Hard is an adjective here, meaning difficult and opposite to easy. So please pay attention to these sentences and to the fact that hard and hardly both can be different parts of speech and have various meanings. When we speak about the past perfect tense, we speak about this hardly. Hardly as a conjunction, meaning immediately after. Now, what about no sooner? As we saw, no sooner is used with the past perfect tense, but that's not the only tense with which you can use this structure. Let's look at some examples. I would no sooner leave my kids with her than send them to the moon. No sooner do you feel like you've arrived somewhere than the road is calling you again. No sooner than he had dealt with one problem, but another one would appear. Pay attention that in the second sentence the word order is inverted. No sooner do you feel like you've arrived. In the last sentence, no sooner than we had dealt, the word order is not inverted, but we can do that. Let's see. No sooner had we dealt with one problem, but another one would appear. As you see in these sentences, no sooner is used in different tenses and with a little bit of a difference in its meaning. I would no sooner leave my kids. No way I will leave my kids, yeah? No sooner do you feel like you've arrived means you arrive somewhere and immediately you feel that you need to move on. No sooner that we dealt with one problem. A typical example with no sooner is such that contains the past perfect tense. So in this sentence it means only when or right after. Right after we had dealt with one problem, another one appeared. Also pay attention to would in this sentence. Here would expresses repeated action. No sooner, hardly, scarcely, barely, all these words tend to invert the word order in a sentence. You see that the auxiliary verb had goes to the first place, like in questions. Yeah, but this is not a question. No sooner had we dealt with one problem, but another one would appear. Or then another one would appear. The last tense that we are going to discuss today is the past perfect progressive. It is formed with the help of two auxiliaries, had and been, that are not changed according to persons. The main verb acquires the ending ing. I had been working for that company for 2 years before I was promoted for the first time. She hadn't been doing anything really important that day, so when he arrived and asked her out, she immediately accepted his invitation. When I saw you yesterday, your eyes were red. Had you been crying? What do we see here? We see a process that preceded another action in the past. We use the past perfect progressive to express a continuing action completed before a certain moment in the past. This moment may be marked by another past action expressed by a verb in the past simple or by an adverbial phrase. Just as in the case of the past perfect tense, we also used an action in the past simple like a marker. We have two kinds of markers in the past perfect progressive tense, and both must be used because before and when plus past simple show us that an action happened before another action in the past. The second, for, helps us express duration. I had been sleeping for an hour or two when the alarm went off. So we have two markers here. For, that shows us that something was going on for a while. It shows duration. And when plus past simple, that show us that this action happened before another action in the past. Let's make it visual. When I arrived yesterday, the concert had already been going on for half an hour. So we have two actions in the past. I arrived at one of those moments when the concert was going on. But what I want to stress with the help of the past perfect progressive tense is not the process that was going on at the moment when I arrived, but what preceded it. The concert had already been going on for a while before I arrived. Compare. I came when she was cooking. I'm talking about the process which was going on at the moment when I came. And that's all what I care about. The concert had already been going on when I arrived. I'm speaking about the process that preceded my arrival and was going on at the very moment when I arrived. With these two tenses, we shed light onto different parts of the timeline. Just like with the present continuous tense, when we use past progressive tense, what we care about is the process that was going on at the very particular moment of another simple action. When we use a perfect progressive tense, we speak about something that preceded that another action. Some more examples to compare these two tenses. It was raining silently outside, so I opened the window to better hear the soothing sound of rain. It had already been raining for days, and the ground got soaked with water. Here we have a process that was going on at a particular moment in the past. When I opened the window, a single action in the past and the process in the past. Here we have a process that preceded another action in the past. It had already been raining for days before the ground soaked with water. I was doing my grammar exercises when she called. I had already been doing grammar exercises for 2 hours, so I decided to take a short break. I was doing at a particular moment, when she called. A single action in the past that happened while another action was going on. I had already been doing grammar exercises. This is a process that preceded another action in the past when I decided to take a short break. When we arrived, my grandpa was gathering strawberries in the garden. And when we arrived, we saw 2 buckets full of berries. My grandpa had been working in the garden since early morning and had gathered a huge lot of strawberries. He was gathering at that moment when we arrived. And here we have an action that had been going on for a while before we arrived. And another action is in the past perfect tense that shows us the result. By the time we arrived, he had gathered a huge lot of strawberries, right? Let's explain the use of the tenses in these sentences. The first one, I had already made the phone call before he came in. what do we see? An action that happened and finished before another action in the past. So that's why the past perfect I had already made, yeah, and the past simple tenses are used. I had been talking over the phone for some 20 minutes before he came in. An action that had been going on for a while before another action happened in the past. The past perfect progressive, I had been talking over the phone, is used. And the past simple, he came in. I was talking over the phone when he came in. That's an action that was going on in the past and another action that happened amidst it. An action that interrupted it. So the past progressive and the past simple tenses are used. He came in and I made a phone call. These are two consequent actions in the past. One happened right after the other. We do not need the past perfect tense here because these are two actions in a row. We tell a story. Yeah? I was talking over the phone while he was reading his mail. Two simultaneous actions in progress or two processes in the past. The past continuous tense is used in both cases, yeah, in both predicates. Okay, it seems that I have said everything I had to say about the past tenses. I hope this second part of our series on the 12 grammatical tenses of the English language was useful. We'll continue with the third part where we'll speak about the future tenses next time. Please subscribe to this channel if you don't want to miss any lessons, and see you in the next video.